Am I finished writing about the Bruce family? As I sit here today, honestly, I don't know. If you haven't read the books, now would be a good time to stop because there will be spoilers along in this episode. Because I want to kind of think about and talk about whether I'm going to write any more on the Fractured Horizons series. We kind of ended it right there and Live the Last Day with Casey kind of making that pledge to Cliff and I guess to whoever. And I kind of left it open-ended a little bit because we don't know what he's pledging to do. Is he going to college? Is he going to take over the family business? Is he going to become a crusader? Who knows where Casey's headed? And right now, in my mind, there's several forks in the road that Casey could take. And I would love to go back at some point on down the line, maybe several years ahead, and see where Casey has gone, what Casey's up to. And Katie also, because she was right there with him. Will she become a part of it? Will she do things on her own? There's still a lot of questions kind of left unanswered after the trilogy kind of ended right there. I did that on purpose because I guess I really didn't want it to be over. I mean, writing 3 books is difficult. It took a long time, 3 years, to write all 3 books, to go through them, to edit them. And I know some of the comments and some of the reviews have said some things about little things here and there. It needs editing. Of course it does. I mean, really and truthfully, I'm doing this all on my own with the help of some other people. But we're not professionals in any matter of fact. So if you read one of my books and you see something, email me. My email address is right there. You can contact me through the website, pelham.com. Let me know. I'll be glad to change it. Anyway, is this over? And my answer is I don't know. The thing that's crossed my mind most lately is going back. There's a lot of little subplots and characters in this story that I know have very interesting backgrounds. For one, we'll take Burt Williams. That cat has got to have some stories in his past. I mean, we catch up with him right there as he's met Susie and they're married and they come back to the Florida Panhandle and that advertisement for Vern, kind of zaps her lightning, for a lack of a better term. And they get involved back with Vern and Cliff. And the whole ball of wax starts rolling down the hill, or the snowball, whatever you want to call it. And before that point, we know a little bit about their backstory, how she met Burt, what Burt was kind of like. But we also saw that Burt has kind of a soft side. I mean, it's very well hidden, it's very deep. It doesn't surface very often, and when it does, usually the roar of that Dixie Mafia gangster comes crashing back over him, and it doesn't last very long. But it's there. And I would like to explore his upbringing. And if you read the books, you know that he came from like the Mississippi Delta area. And very young, he fled that. And he ended up on the coast and got involved with the underworld there of Old Biloxi and New Orleans, Mobile, and to a lesser extent down the coast, Panama City, Apalachicola, down that area. The Dixie Mafia was very much in force in the times that Burt Williams grew up. And he grew up very quickly on that Gulf Coast when he left the Mississippi Delta. And I think that would be an interesting story to tell, how we got from, a young kid there in the Delta to, the multi-millionaire drug smuggler that he weaseled his way into after the deaths of some certain people. And I won't spoil it too much. But he's a conniving joker. I'll give him that. He kind of wormed his way into that fortune, and then he immediately squandered, and it cost him his life. But going back, I would love to see how he got to that point. So that would probably be more interesting to me to write, rather than taking up Casey right now and seeing where he's going. I like that just be kind of left up in there. Like I said, I'm not a big proponent of happy endings in stories that do not earn them. And that was really not a happy ending per se. It was more of a reckoning. That's one that I would like to go back and talk about. And another one that you might not think about was Pops, Vern and Ross's father. There's something there. And we kind of come back around to it and live the last day when we found out that who Vern's father was. And I'm trying not to spoil the books too much, just in case you haven't read them. But that little triangle right there between the mother and father and this other guy, and we already know it's Mac Tate. So that little triangle right there would be an interesting story to tell. Going back to why all that transpired. What happened between all of them? Why did it carry on for so long? Why did it carry over to the next generation and the next generation? So that would be an interesting story to tell. And I actually went back in one of the drafts that I was writing of Previous Tides and kind of changed that up a little bit. Originally in the story, there was no indication of that. There was no question of Vern's lineage or parentage. But when I went back and added that, that added just another layer of the life that these two boys were thrown into, especially Vern. To me, Vern is the most tragic character. Now, you think about what happened to Cliff and Casey and all that, but Vern initially was a person in a small place, right there, Panama City, Bay County, that area right there, Gulf County. And that one step, took him so deep that he never could swim out of, and eventually caused him to go mad, as we saw in the last book. So that would be a good story to tell. I would love to, I don't think it would be a book, maybe a short story about Susie's time after she left Panama City down to New Orleans and Biloxi and those areas. I think that's something I'd like to explore, but making an entire book out of that, it could happen. Who knows? If any of my writing ever catches on anywhere in the books, move a little bit more than just good independent reviews, that come our way, kind of latches on and would go in another direction, and these people start discovering these books. Who knows what I may write. I've also got a phone full of ideas. Every time I have an idea, I jot it down on my phone. So there's all kind of stories that I'm thinking about. But like I said, I'm working on Come Our Way right now, very personal, so I'm taking my time with it. It will probably, I know if I don't find an agent and a publisher and all that good stuff after I get through and I query it, it will not come out in 2027. I'm pretty sure about that. Because right now we're halfway through 2026. It's not June 1st. We're actually June the 10th. There is no way I'd have this ready to go by December 2027. There's a slight possibility, but I want to try to give this enough time after I get through writing this second draft. I'm gonna let it breathe a little bit and see what I've got before I come back to it. So it's gonna take me a while to work my way back around to the Bruce family. I had written a chapter, that was the opening chapter of one of the books. I think it was the second book, but it focused on Jefferson Black, the Brazilian Confederado, and a flashback to his grandmother, Balmain. I guess that's how you say it in Portuguese. But that translated into Good Mama, which kind of come from my own family. My grandmother called her grandmother Good Mama, and I wanted to include that, this little tidbit if you didn't know that. But that character, exploring his background, the Confederados. When I first started writing Perfidious Tides, I was kind of enthralled with the Confederados, which is a real thing in Brazil. They're still there. They still celebrate by dressing as Confederates in antebellum garb. And I wanted to explore that. I had thought about writing a backstory at one point about that was part of the book, so that's confusing. But I would love to go back and explore Jefferson Black's, background. The Confederados of Brazil. But to write something like that, you really have to get into their lives and do a lot of research, and that's very time consuming. I did read a couple of books. One, I didn't even know that I was related to a lady, but her name was Janet Falk, and she wrote a book, and it's right here I read it. It is called Southern Cross. It is, we are related, and I knew nothing of this lady, and she had written a book about something similar to the Confederados, and I read it, book, I enjoyed it, and I would like to explore that. Her story came from a real story that she had read, I believe she told me. But if you have not read Southern Cross by Janet Falk, it is available on Amazon. And I would love for you to take a look at that book. But to go back, like I said, to look at Jefferson Black, I'd have to do a lot of research, especially of the language, the Portuguese language, because these Confederates assimilated into Brazilian society, and as Jefferson Black kind of identified as Brazilian and Confederate, very, very strange situation. So one day, maybe years from now, when I'm retired and I have time to actually do the research, we may visit Jefferson Black again. Ryan Kelly, that's another one. Would love to think about his story, because it was kind of thrust upon us there at the end, kind of rushed. And I regret that a little bit, but there's time to take a look back at his life. So a lot of these characters, their backgrounds, I would love to go back and look at them. But like I said, it's going to be a while before I get back to it. I'm going to let this story breathe for a while, and I'll think about it from time to time, as I usually do in strange places. It'll just pop in my mind. I start thinking about, stories. So there are stories there in my mind, but it will be a while before they take place. But there is one way to help that out. That is word of mouth. And of all the advertising that I've done and everything I've done to promote the 3 books, word of mouth is a great tool. And it takes you to help me with that. When I put things out there on Facebook or YouTube or anywhere, social media wise, if you could just share it to one person, that would help me tremendously. They could share it to one person. That is the way the independent authors survive, is word of mouth. Because all this money we put into advertising, it helps, but not greatly. Like, I checked an Amazon ad, and I'll do a podcast on Amazon ads on its own at one point, but for $14 spent, I had one sale. And that's kind of the way that Amazon kind of sucks that money back that they give up in royalties. And I've been very, very weary since I tried it last summer to do any Amazon ads. But I thought I would give another shot this summer, put a little bit of money into it, see where it goes, because it is a long shot to get any traction for those ads as an unknown independent author. The worst money that I ever spent was in BookBub. I poured money into BookBub ads last summer and got absolutely nothing out of them. Absolutely nothing. The best ever advertising that I've done other than word of mouth is the Fussy Librarian list that you pay a fee. They put your book out there. You make it 99 cents or free for a limited time. Fussy Librarian, free Booksy. That is another good one. That is really what got the ball rolling last year, was a free Booksy ad right there around Memorial Day. And I started getting orders, although the book was free that day or that weekend. It was unreal. It pushed it up in the top 100 paid at one point. And that's a big deal. But word of mouth. If I put something out there, if you would just click the button and share it, that would help me out a lot. And the more we get these books out there, the better the chance that I will come back to them and write some of these stories. I'm not going to do this in spite of the stories I have in my mind. I have one right now that after I finish Come Our Way and what happens with that happens. It's a story that as I was teaching at a juvenile detention facility a couple of years ago that kept kind of brewing in my mind. And that's probably going to be the next book. It'll be centered around something of that nature. But like I said, that's going to be a couple of years down the road, because Come Our Way is my focus right now. But having said all that, like, I would ask you one more time, and I appreciate the people who have supported me, kind words, read the book, the reviews. My next podcast is going to be about reviews and how they help independent authors. So hit the share button, tell people about it, link your copy of Perfidious Tides out to people. Let them read it. Say, here, try this book. You may like it, you may not. This writing is not for everybody, but try it. I have no qualms with people passing along copies of Perfidious Tides, because that in turn maybe creates some interest, and down the road they'll pick up Last Castle, and then they'll pick up Live the Last Day, and we'll build that momentum from there. But until next time, I'll talk to you later.